I want to thank you all for being here. I want to express my appreciation for the great work you've done and to call upon each and every one of you to bring this issue not only to your friends and our daughters, but to our sons and our men in the world today. This is an issue that we cannot address alone. In fact, we need men who are primarily those who perpetrate these crimes to take responsibility for not necessarily their own personal behavior, but for the behavior of half the population. So I think we need to really understand that this is not just a women's issue. In fact, if anything, it is a man's issue. Because what we need to do in our society is understand and appreciate and respect each other. Men respecting men, men respecting women, women respecting women, and vice versa. So, or I shouldn't say vice versa, because I left it with women respecting women and vice versa. But I think what's important is now this issue, many of us have been involved in this issue for a long time. I see many of us before we turned white and had robust heads of dark and light hair that wasn't gray. And it's been a long journey, but one that continues to be a challenge. Fortunately, the President of the United States has picked up this challenge, and he's got a campaign, I think, called It's on Us. And we need to bring boys and girls clubs here. We need to get children, both boys and girls, when they are young, when they are impressionable. And we need to address this problem at the earliest possible stage. That violence, that abuse is not acceptable behavior. So I can tell you that when I was in the assembly many, many years ago and had some familiarity as a result of having been a district attorney here in town back in the beginning of my career, and observed something I never saw at home, because in my home, my dad would say it's very important for the man to get in the last two words of every disagreement. And those two words are, yes, dear. And so imagine my shock when I came out and the last two words usually, or frequently, I should say frequently, are not words, but acts of violence. And we know, too, that sexual assault is not a crime of sexual desire. It's a crime of power. It's a crime of disrespect. It's a crime of dominance and power. And it's something that has been going on in society since, I think, the beginning of time. And it's going on now in war zones, where the policy is to rape the women. I know that in some countries, if you can get them pregnant, you have destroyed a whole generation, because these children are not accepted or acceptable to anybody. And why should children be born out of rape instead of love? So it's a challenge, no question about it. In the legislature, I did legislation that called upon local communities, and I want to reinvite and offer this thought to us right here in beautiful Santa Barbara, California, that would encourage age-appropriate education on domestic violence issues, on respect, and on treatment of dignity at our youngest ages, in age-appropriate education, where we had rape crisis centers and domestic violence shelters going into the schools, working with the schools to address this problem, to talk to children about what is okay behavior and not okay behavior. Because the truth of the matter is, we learn a lot of our behavior, we model after our parents. So we have young men who think that the way that they relate to their women is to be abusive. Girls think that that's the way they're supposed to relate to their men, to be abused. And we have to break this cycle. So that was legislation I did. And in doing the work I did in helping to start the first shelter here in Santa Barbara back in the 70s, we called the project the Violence in the Family Project. We didn't call it domestic violence because the concern then was, well, it's women's own fault. Why don't they leave? Remember that discussion? Well, we started looking into why they don't leave. And part of the reason they don't leave is they have nowhere to go. Because part of what an abuser does is they isolate their partner. They take away any access they might have to the financial ability to do anything. And they degrade them to the point where these people, primarily women, feel worthless. So they don't go. So I did a bill in the legislature that provides a stipend to women who are anxious and prepared and realize the importance of getting out of a violent situation, so that if they get a restraining order, they can then also access funds to set up a home someplace away from their abuser. So those are things that I've done. And then in the workplace, I did a bill last year that's now the law that requires that employers make reasonable accommodations for employees who are either domestic violence victims or victims of harassment or stalking, so that they can keep working and that their employers will know that there is the potential for danger and make an accommodation. And after I introduced the bill, there was a somewhat famous incident that occurred in San Diego, where a woman was teaching at a parochial school, had been for 12 years, getting rave reviews, had 4 children and an ex-husband who was violent and had actually been in jail for violating a restraining order. And she had had a particularly difficult exchange with the children that weekend and advised the school. This is important, what you can deal with. And he showed up at the school, just sitting in the parking lot in his car. They locked down the school. The next day, they put her on indefinite leave and told her to take her children out of the school. They were not welcome there. And then at the end of the school year, they fired her. Now think about that. Are we going to allow the re-victimization of a victim? So this legislation says you can't do that. You have to try to make reasonable accommodations for people. For example, you're sitting in the front office. There's a stalker or an abuser who you are afraid may come in. You're the front desk. How about if we move that person to a back desk? How about we make sure that she works late and is going out in the dark to her car or to get transportation home, that someone escorts her? Or if someone is making phone calls, change the extension. These are simple things to do, which may sound like a no-brainer, but it took a legislative effort to now require that employers have some sensitivity. And of course, the bill that I'm actually very excited about, not that I wasn't pleased about those, is I authored the bill that yes means yes. The theme here, I'll take applause for that. You should have seen some of the love letters that we got from people. I've got a couple of them that I have kept, because the notion that changing the culture is going to be detrimental to men. It's not detrimental to anybody. It's very clear now. You have to say yes. There has to be affirmative consent. And if 2 parties are on an equal footing and they want to consent, that is their decision. So this is the revolution, I think, that is part of what you're doing here today. Talking about revolution. We must change the culture. And we're starting on college campuses. We need to start sooner, though. We need to start in the earliest grades. I know I'm preaching to the converted, but I just want you to know that there are people up in Sacramento and here in our community, our mayor, our assembly member, who understand, who are committed to this. Keep raising your voices, keep dancing, keep singing, keep yelling, because we must change the world, and together we will. Thank you all for letting me be here with you.